you just cannot say, I'm too old to do this or that. And, one of the examples, like I just turned 80 last year, but when I was in my 60s, I was doing ballroom dance cruising, and people would sort of come up to me and say, oh, it's so wonderful to see you do this. I wish I could dance, but, I'm too old. And I'm looking at them and I'm thinking they're probably not even 60 or 70. So I think it's really important to realize that if you make up your mind to do something, I mean, obviously barring things like if you have a fracture and you can't walk or something like that, whatever you choose to do, challenge yourself and believe that you can do it.
Welcome to She Coaches Coaches, the podcast where we have thoughtful, honest conversations about what it really takes to build a thriving coaching business. I'm your host, Candy Motzek, and before building my business, I spent years as a senior corporate leader. Now, today, I work with coaches who are smart, well-trained, and deeply capable, and who want clarity about how to grow in a way that feels aligned and financially sustainable. On this show, I sit down with successful coaches to explore the real decisions behind their success, how they got started, what shifted as they grew, and the mindset and business choices that helped them gain momentum without burning out. Whether you're early in your coaching journey or refining a business you've already built, She Coaches Coaches is here to offer perspective, confidence, and grounded insight to support your next chapter. To learn more about how I work with people, go to my website, stepintosuccessnow.com. And now let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of She Coaches Coaches. I'm Candy Motzek, your host, and I have a special guest for you. Her name is Dr. Gillian Lockitch, and she's a specialist physician, professor emerita. She hosts the Growing Older, Living Younger podcast. After life-saving spinal surgery, epigenetic wellness strategies changed her aging at the cellular level. Her roadmap for aging youthfully became the foundation of the Growing Older, Living Younger project and podcast that is now in its fourth season. She redefines aging through science-based lifestyle strategies to prove that age is just a number, and if we believe we can live younger, longer, and be active and vital until the end. Gillian, I love that. Thank you so much for that wonderful bio. And also,
Thank you for having me on this podcast.
I'm a big believer in age is a number. It is a number, but it doesn't have to define who I am. So looking forward to this conversation. Tell me, what are you super excited about right now in your business? What's really going on?
That's actually a wonderful question, and I would like to show you if I'm not sure if it'll show. Do you see this?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. This is an amazing device that basically has really revolutionized my ability to help people understand how they can protect their bodies against all the external oxidant stresses, sunlight, stress, radiation, toxins, and various things like this. And this exciting new device, it's called the Prism. And everyone can get one. You can hold it in your hand. It's the size of a puck. And in 30 seconds, it will tell you how good your carotenoid antioxidant protection is. And I'm not sure how familiar people are with the words carotenoids, but it's things like beta carotene, lutein, lycopene, zeaxanthin, astaxanthin, and these are all fat-soluble antioxidants that really protect your eyes, your heart, your brain, your skin, and entire body. So that's what I'm absolutely passionate about talking about today.
So talk to me a little bit more about oxidants, antioxidants, and how important they are for aging.
Well, think about what happens if you cut an apple and you leave it exposed to the air. It'll go brown over time. However, if you sprinkle lemon juice all over the apple surface, it'll stay nice and shiny white for a long time. And What is happening is the brownness is coming from like rusting. That's the oxidation of the apple. And the lemon juice is acting as an antioxidant. So okay, I do tend to get into my medical biochemistry 101, so I'll try and keep this really straightforward. So our bodies make natural antioxidants to protect us against rusting, but we also get a lot of these antioxidants from our diet. And the carotenoids are a group that only come from our diet. And the interesting thing about them is that they are fat soluble as opposed to water soluble, which means they get distributed in the fatty tissues of the body, like in the macular area in the eye, in the myelin area in the brain, and wherever else fatty areas are deposited. So they're a really important group of antioxidants. And what this very special new device does, it'll give you a score between 0 or 1, I should say, and 1,000. And it's the absolute number is not as important as whether you are in the red, the orange, the yellow, the green, or the blue or purple zones. The further you are in purple, it'll give you an overall idea of how well you are protected. And it reflects how you exercise, what stress you're under, what you eat, basically all of the lifestyle things that contribute to wellness. So I'm really excited about sharing this with anybody who's interested. And, they can contact me by email and ask Dr. And I'll set up a Zoom and show them exactly how it works.
Wonderful. So when we're thinking of aging, and I think that what you're talking about right now is really timely. What used to be a 50-year-old 50 years ago is no longer the life of a 50-year-old. All those years ago, people would think, that's it, I'm going to turn 50 and I'm going to have lots of grandchildren. I'm going to sit on my porch in my rocking chair and that's it. And now we have a completely different idea about the second half of our life. We don't think that we're just going to be sedentary. We're going to go out and do some of the things that we couldn't do before because of different responsibilities. And we still have that desire to do more, to contribute more, to have an impact. So we think differently about aging now than we used to. And so, what like making sure that our bodies are working well, that we age well, what would be some of the top tips that you would recommend for people?
Well, one of the things that really has impressed me is, you'll hear all these sort of people promoting a single wonderful magic pill that will change your aging. I think it's so important to realize that there's just basic fundamental things that you have to deal with. You have to make sure that you eat well, and what well is very dependent from person to person, but we can talk a bit more about that. You have to keep active. That's absolutely critical. Keep your mind active and keep your body active. You have to be part of a larger community, and communication and sharing is really, really critical. And then I believe you have to challenge yourself. So it's you just cannot say, I'm too old to do this or that. And one of the examples, like, I just turned 80 last year, but when I was in my 60s, I was doing ballroom dance cruising, and people would sort of come up to me and say, oh, it's so wonderful to see you do this. I wish I could dance, but, I'm too old. And I'm looking at them and I'm thinking they're probably not even 60 or 70. So I think it's really important to realize that if you make up your mind to do something, I mean, obviously barring things like if you have a fracture and you can't walk or something like that, whatever you choose to do, challenge yourself and believe that you can do it. So my mantra really for this year has become, if you believe you can, you will.
And, so in that aspect of challenging yourself, it's not just the challenge. To me, it's about challenging yourself to do something that's meaningful. It could be anything from dance as your example, or it could be writing a book, or it could be, walking 10 miles a day. Like, what is a challenge for you as an individual? And then working towards it. So there's something to look forward to, right?
One of the biggest challenges for me is I have always been a, do, get there. If you're on time, you're late kind of thing. And what the big challenge that I undertook was to tell myself to slow down, listen rather than talk, and really learn how to meditate and do that kind of a thing. I'd always, every time I'd thought about meditation, it's like after 2 seconds, I can't do this. I haven't got time to sit here trying to empty my mind. That's changed. That for me was a huge, huge challenge. I have
Mm.
other friends who have gone volunteering, some who've decided to go and do a massive hike, which is up one of those huge mountains, which is not something that ever appealed to me, but it was a challenge that they undertook and they met.
Something that they wanted too.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, and there's that looking forward to something, like I would like to achieve that, in the example of meditation, it's a different kind of challenge. Everybody defines success and having an impact in a different way. What's one idea that changed how you think about success or having an impact? What is that one idea that shifted it for you?
That's a very interesting question. I think for me, the realization that I couldn't change the world, but if I worked individually, one on one with people to understand how they felt and what they could achieve by simple lifestyle changes, that would be one little ripple that would go out. And if you send out enough ripples, you get a wave. And if you send out enough waves, you get a tsunami. So starting with one person and making a difference there can make a big difference ultimately in the world. So I guess that would be my big thought. Exactly.
As you look forward, what is something deeply meaningful that you would like to be accomplishing in your business over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think probably the most meaningful is for me to help people to understand that they have the power within themselves to change their course of aging. So, that's the whole thing behind epigenetics is there are things that we can't change. I mean, fortunately, we can't change the way our genes work as we're developing from a fetus into a baby. But as we grow older, everything is basically affected by a lot of the actions and the choices we make. So if we choose not to smoke, if we choose to be really careful about what we eat, if we choose to be nice to people instead of looking for the worst in them, it's amazing how all of these tiny, tiny little choices can make a huge difference to how we personally age and how we will feel, when we're lying there right at the end, very healthy, but just ready to go, that we'll feel that our purpose has been accomplished.
And again, it's a very similar thing. It's this similar to your previous answer, one person, one effort, one change in how you approach life, and that cumulative piece. Can you share a little bit for me about your book that you wrote? Curious about that. I see it on the screen, and so I'd love to hear a little bit more about that too.
Yeah, well, the book is actually the fundamental basis of the Growing Older, Living Younger program, my podcast, and everything. So essentially, what happened was I had this emergency spinal surgery, realized that I had to do a massive rehabilitation if I was going to get back on the Dancer cruise 10 months later. And during the course of that whole rehabilitation is when I discovered the whole essence of epigenetics, which is the ability to change not your genes, but how your genes are functioning. And that was really the start of me developing the 7 pillars of the Growing Older, Living Younger program. So I wanted to share all this amazing, amazing information. And so I started writing this book. It's called The Science of Aging Gracefully. And, I had 300 pages of science. And I thought to myself, I don't want to read this. And I don't know that anyone else would. And that was when my very wise daughter said to me, Mom, just tell your story, and the science will flow from that. And so the book actually changed from the one I'd originally intended writing. It's really a memoir about the time following my spinal surgery and the various aspects of how I dealt with things. So it's a collection of stories with a science woven in. So I call it part memoir, part science. And on the basis, so I was waiting for this book to be published. And then, of course, COVID happened and nothing was happening. And that's when I decided to get out and do networking. At one of the networking things, somebody suggested to me, why don't you turn your book into a podcast? And I said, what's a podcast? And it all went from there. So ironically, I launched my own podcast on April of I guess it was my 76th birthday. And the book came out the same month.
Isn't that amazing? How did it come together in that magic way, right? You said that there's 7 pillars within your framework. Could you share briefly about those?
Yeah, as they say in the shows, in no particular order. Well, the first one is first, and that's understanding your genetic blueprint and what things there are likely to be able to be changed and not. So that's one. And that sort of involves also understanding your family history of diseases and all of that kind of thing. And then the one pillar is all about eating because I call it You Are What You Eat because you are. And it talks about aspects of nutrition. I've reduced nutrition to a very fundamental thing. Eat whole, unprocessed foods as fresh and as unprocessed as you can make them, preferably organic. And don't be too restrictive, except don't eat carbs, except vegetable carbs. So that was nutrition. Then there's all about movement and posture. Posture is something I've been struggling with, as I think many of us who've spent a lot of time in front of computers, as we get older, there's the whole forward neck posture. And as I stand here, I remind myself I've got to struggle against that. Then one of the chapters is your skin, your beauty is skin deep. And it talks about how you can protect your skin, which after all is the biggest organ in our body. And that's what protects us against all sort of outer or external stresses. Then there's a chapter that is all about communication and loneliness. That I called You're Not Alone. And then I guess the last one is choose a challenge. And we've sort of touched on that. So constantly challenging yourself, whether it's to learn a new musical instrument, whether it's just to get up and take a walk every day, is, I guess, the last pillar.
Wow. I love how it's so comprehensive too. You go through everything from the cellular level through your body, through nutrition. And one thing that I didn't hear, but I'm sure is part of it is sleep. Good
Yeah,
quality sleep, right?
absolutely. So, those are my sort of broad pillars. But if you were to say to me, give me small things that you can do like immediately, one of the first things I would say is make sure you're getting a high quality sleep, try and reduce stress. So if you can't meditate, do things like writing in a journal. Little things like that. Drink enough water. And especially, as we get older, many people are being treated for kidney disease or heart disease, and they're on diuretics that mess up their electrolytes. So be really careful to keep your hydration up, and eat well and be kind to people, and people will be kind to you in return.
And those tips, like they sound so simple and so commonplace and so common sense, right? But they really, really matter. And they have that cumulative effect, like you were talking about earlier. And it doesn't matter what age you are, you do those things and it's going to make your quality of life so much better now, whether you're 35 or 55 or 75. Always makes a difference. Oh, Gillian, I have enjoyed our conversation. Can you share with us how can people find out more about you? And do you have a free gift to offer for the listeners too?
I do. And I believe the gift that I had listed, well, I have two actually. The one I had listed was about preserving your cognitive functions of your brain. But the other one that I can give, I call it a guide to the colorful antioxidants that you can eat. And it talks about all the purple, orange, and, fruits and vegetables and the antioxidants that you can get from that. I will make sure that I get the links to both of those free gifts to you.
Wonderful. And how else can they find you? Are you a LinkedIn person or a website? What's the easiest way?
LinkedIn, my website is called askdrjill.com. My book you can find at gillianlockitch.com, and very simply dropping me an email to ask Dr. Jill, that's GILL at gmail.com, is probably the easiest way to reach me. And then we can always set up Zoom calls to talk further.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm really glad we were here. So, everyone, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. I hope you learned about some of those pillars specifically to grow older, enjoy your life, live younger, and all of the wisdom that Dr. Gillian has brought to us today. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of She Coaches Coaches. If this conversation resonated, take a moment to reflect on what stood out and how it connects to where you are right now. Coaching businesses grow through clarity and thoughtful choices, not pressure or hustle. If you'd like more support, you can learn more at stepintosuccessnow.com. I'll put the link in the episode notes. And if you found this episode helpful, I'd appreciate it if you would share it with a peer or colleague who would enjoy it as well. I appreciate you being here. Have a great day.